first session, first proper session of the day, titled PeaceTech, Wishful Thinking or Reality. I will only introduce the chair of this session, who's Dr. Evelyn, who is a senior advisor at the Agency for Peacebuilding and an associate researcher at the Bergel Foundation. Evelyn, thank you for leading this important conversation, and let me give you the floor to introduce also our new speakers. I encourage the speakers to be timely, and the same for the next sessions, so to ensure we are on time. Thanks again. You have the floor.
Thanks, Stefano, and welcome also to my panelists. Hi, we haven't met yet. Hi. Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you, AP, for organizing everything. Thank you for volunteers for running around. And thank you also to Roger for those comments that really set us up nicely, I think, for the day. And now I think we're ready to dig into it, into the topic of the conference, so around PeaceTech. And we've heard just now that potentially the next conflict will be about data. And it's clear that we're living in an era where digital technology is not just changing how we connect and communicate, it's also starting to shape how we try to prevent conflict, negotiate peace, even though maybe the era of peace process is over. Let's see. And to build more resilient societies in general. And from AI-driven early warning systems to inclusive digital platforms for dialogue, the promise of PeaceTech is both exciting and complex. And today we'll explore these topics with three leading experts through the lens of diplomacy, mediation, and peacebuilding practice. And our speakers today will bring experiences from the field as both practitioners and academics who have worked on this for a long time. So I won't introduce them in their full bios. You can find them online because they're quite distinguished and it would take a long time. So I will just briefly introduce them. Then we'll do 2 rounds of questions that I've asked my speakers to answer, and then we'll open it up for your Q&As. So first, I would like to introduce Michele Giovanardi, who's the Program Director for Digital Peacemaking at CMI, the Martti Ahtisaari Peace Foundation. Next, we're joined by Andrea Locatelli, who's a professor at the Università Cattolica in Milan. And finally, we're joined by Lena Slachmuijlder, who's a senior advisor for digital peacebuilding at Search for Common Ground and the co-chair of the Council on Tech and Social Cohesion. Thank you all for joining us today. So my first question goes to Michele. And CMI has positioned itself with digital peacemaking as one of its strategic priorities. Maybe you can pick us all up and talk a little bit about what prompted that shift. What does digital peacemaking actually mean in practice? And what technologies are we really talking about?
Thank you very much, Evelyn, and thank you all for having us, for having me, for inviting me, and also for organizing this conference in this space quite consistently in the years. Really, I want to acknowledge your work in Italy, especially as a leading organization, Agency for Peacebuilding, creating this space for the conversation. It's now quite hard to talk about CMI because of all the thought-provoking questions. I would like to share so many thoughts with you, but of course I will stick to the question. And digital peacemaking, as we call it at CMI, or PeaceTech, is there are many labels, but it's basically one movement. It has been is now a strategic priority. But before being a strategic priority at CMI, Martti Ahtisaari Peace Foundation was a practice. So CMI was founded by a former president of Finland and Nobel Peace Prize, Martti Ahtisaari, in the year 2000. So it has quite a long track record of work in peace mediation and dialogue. And Martti himself, admittedly, was not very tech savvy, but he understood very well the role of the digital dimension. And even before his role as a president and a leading person at CMI, he was driving much of the digital transformation within the UN. So he always understood this, this dimension was very important, and we had to keep pace. And we started, they started, because of course I wasn't even, I was very young, with including digital methodologies at CMI pretty early. And by seeing the value of this in their work, they then, after that, they establish that as a strategic priority, which means that we are constantly investing in innovating in this space. And the CMI vision for digital peacemaking is that technology can become really a transformative tool in what we do, and of course now the buzzword is AI. So also with these new investments all over the board on AI, we also want to make sure that AI becomes a force for peace, and doing that by anchoring this in the real needs of people and affected by conflict in different regions. And of course, we also follow an approach at CMI where what we do is always complementary, and it is always, the peace process is always owned by the conflict parties, and we're just there to support and to enhance the process. And what we do is always like driven by needs. So in the question of, are we doing this just because it's cool? Tech is the new thing? No, actually, it's something that always comes from the regional teams and from the local actors. So our work, after this kind of introduction about CMI, it's specifically on digital peacemaking, goes around different areas, and I can mention at least 3 or 4 different areas. We have an area of digital inclusion, so we use technology to reach more people or to overcome geographical barriers, and we do that with different tools to gather information from the local actors and stakeholders, and from low-tech tools, but also now, for instance, recently in 2023, we used this tool called Remesh AI that also the UN and other organizations have been using. It allows you to talk to several people at the same time and gather information quite extensively and with a depth of knowledge on to what's their opinion, their feedback, their priorities within a certain process or conflict. The second area is future-oriented dialogues and foresight. Foresight is about thinking of the future of a certain process or the certain country or situation in the next 5, 10, or 15 years. And this helps a lot in, let's say, moving the conflict parties beyond the issues they don't agree on in the present, and thinking of the future of the country on different areas and topics. And to use that, we use technology as well. So we use this Inclus platform, which is now a private company, but it was built within CMI. And what this technology does is that everyone in a room like this would not only just raise our hands or talk, but you would have a phone, and you would give feedback, and this feedback is mapped out, and it's on a priority map, and all the different topics or risks are mapped out, and you can start a conversation around that, and this flattens a little bit the power dynamics in the room. Everyone has a chance to see their opinion represented, and how distant is that from each other statement or opinion. And we do with this methodology, we build this foresight exercise where we develop a vision again for the process that can be used later on. And then we have a whole work around AI and how we can use AI in our mediation work to support our mediation. And this goes from conflict analysis. So AI, of course, can analyze data from social media, from news outlets, but also from your reports, your own work. So how do we use that in our work? That's an area of exploration and use. And we use extensively AI in digital consultation. So we have this WhatsApp bot that also other organizations are using, where our stakeholders can basically talk to us through vocal messages or even chat, and I can explain better later how this works. and AI would help organize this vast amount of feedback you get. So just our team could never like analyze all these different inputs, so you can have like more representation, but also more depth into what you get. And across all these dimensions, we work, of course, also on the security element and risk mitigation. So we have several initiatives to make sure this is used responsibly. But our niche is really about innovation. So how everyone is using technology, everyone is using AI. Why don't we use it as well? You know, in the peace space. So we really give our whole energy to innovate and have new use cases on how we use concretely these things, so that we can have more investment on what works, and we can basically use AI for good. I don't know how much time I have.
You can take a couple minutes.
That's the main to answer the question. This is why this is a strategic priority for us, and this is a bit of an overview of what we do. But the most important point is that I often say that so tech solutionism is the enemy of peace tech. So in a sense, it needs to be very clear and important that having technology for peace is not useful if you don't have a good process design or a good political process to attach the technology to it. So it's an enhancer of a human effort. So it supports and augments and makes faster and easier what we do. So we observe that it changes the dynamic in the room, it changes the work of our mediators, it makes it better, faster, more effective, but it will never work. So there's this idea that if you throw tech at something, and it will solve a problem that we haven't been able to solve in years, as the professor said, you know, this datafication kind of idea. That's not our approach. So there's a need. There's a trust network of trust that we build in advance in years, and you're only able to use tech because people trust you, and of course they believe you will not use the data they give to you for bad things, or they trust the process. They trust what they say. It's attached to a political process, and their voice will be heard and will count. So I wanted to end by stressing this human-machine interaction point. So it's always important to keep in mind. Otherwise, we should not even talk about PeaceTech.
Thank you so much for those comments. And yeah, I think that last point that you mentioned, I think is probably shared in sentiment by a lot of people also in the room. Next, I want to come to Andrea and hear about maybe different kinds of actors who are also getting engaged in the digital sort of peacemaking field, which are more traditional, let's say, state diplomatic actors, right? So you've been working on digital diplomacy and how that might be reshaping sort of traditional diplomatic norms. And I also want to ask you, what digital tools or platforms, from your perspective, would have the most potential in diplomatic engagements in conflict-affected settings, whether in prevention, peace processes, or post-conflict reconciliation?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for the invitation. I would say that a disclaimer is in order, because digital diplomacy is not something new. I mean, there is something going on, at least in the past 20 years, but there's still some debate on whether it is a revolution calling us to develop new theories, new approaches, or it is just a technical adjustment, you know, just practices that are evolving simply because diplomats need to get technological savvy. But I would say that we can also craft a middle ground, you know, a camp that I will just stick to and say that there is something going on. We don't need a theoretical revolution, that is not exclusive of diplomacy, but we need to understand the impact that new technologies will have, but the impact will be somehow mediated by the ingenuity, creativity of diplomats themselves. So just to answer your question, and spoiler, my take on digital diplomacy and peace, that we still have a missed opportunity. There is a lot of work that we can do. Let me start with the definition of what is digital diplomacy, and I'd like to read the one that is available in the latest version of the Oxford Digital Diplomacy Handbook that I would suggest to all students. It's just 845 pages book, so easy reading. Let me read it with you. digital diplomacy is the use of digital technologies, and we're going to see them in a while, by Ministry of Foreign Affairs and international organizations to communicate with each other and the general public, conduct diplomacy, and advance their foreign policy goals. So I will call it a very conservative definition, and a definition that misses part of the innovation. Why? First and foremost, because the only actors that are studied by digital diplomacy are diplomats, so states, bureaucrats, as they are, and international organizations. But of course, there is a recognition that innovations empower different actors. We have already talked about companies, but we might talk also about transnational advocacy movements and NGOs, for example. So if you take this perspective, and I would say that at least analytically, this perspective is correct, because diplomats have been trying to get the most from the technologies that they can use. But if you do that, you will find that diplomats have not changed their work so much. So if you think about peace and the promotion of peace, or also humanitarian action, this is out of the picture, because the functions that we have read, communication, diplomacy, and foreign policy goals, simply amount to, well, I don't want to be too pessimistic, but they amount to public diplomacy. They amount to negotiation, remote negotiation. Is this the kind of impact that we want to have? Of course, during COVID, it was a great asset to hold meetings via Zoom, but that's part of the solution and part of the problem. So in a way, I would say that technologies have been used strategically to communicate with broader publics or with other partners. So what are the technologies that have been used? The one that we all know so well, communication technologies in the forms of social media, in the forms of closed, well, I don't want to mention Signal because it has been overused and misused, but the kinds of apps like WhatsApp and Telegram that made ambassadors organize their own work easily. And artificial intelligence, as mentioned, is also part of the picture, especially when it comes to functions that relate to OSINT, open source intelligence. How do we get information? And the main case study in the laboratory was the Arab Springs a dozen years ago. We could see coming just by looking, performing sentiment analysis on the web. Again, peace is still out of the picture, but of course, fortunately, there are examples of positive use of technologies, although they are ripe, they are fraught with challenges, just to promote peace, conflict solutions, and human development. And I will say that blockchain, in my view, holds some potential. There were examples, again, they are quite contested. But the idea of blockchain is that you can have interactions that do not require authority to certify the authenticity of this kind of interaction. So they may apply to identity for displaced people, for example. How to get the identity of displaced people without resorting to an authority. Because each cell in the chain has got data that can be visible to other cells in the data, and they do not require some other kind external authority. So that might be a technology that holds some potential. It can generate trust. It is useful. It can fight corruption, for example. Another technology, I don't want to run out of time, I'm going to be quick on that, is crowdfunding platforms, or the kind of apps and softwares and tools that allow to create shared knowledge bottom up. And this is, again, quite controversial. Crowdfunding has been used extensively, you might already know about that, during the war in Ukraine. GoFundMe, I don't know if you ever used that platform, raised, if I'm correct, about 280 million euros just in the first year of the war. And crowdfunding has been used also to provide the Ukrainian soldiers with drones. And Ukraine itself has launched a new platform, seems the name is Unite24, something like that. So these are the main technologies. But, and here I want to conclude with these considerations. Again, there is a dark side Like any technology, new technologies, if used properly, may empower people, they may solve conflicts, they may give ambassadors incentives to play a role in mediation. But at the same time, I would say that, and here I come to the changes that are now visible in the norms, not that just in the norms, because I don't see a normative change, but at least in the practice of diplomacy. And the first, and this is why I think it's problematic, communication is changing, and diplomats need to change their own expertise. They need not just to become technically savvy, technologically savvy, but they need to communicate in a different way. Broad communication now requires new grammar rules, so we can talk about that in the question time later, but we need images, not wording. We need emotional engagement, which is very different from the technical role that ambassadors usually have. So that's the first, I would say, change that we can see. Now ambassadors are becoming celebrities, influencers, if you want to take the, if you want to ride the way of digital diplomacy. And I know some ambassadors, I don't think they are really happy to become influencers, and I guess why. The second big change is, as I already mentioned, we have already seen, is that new actors get empowered by technology. Again, companies will play a great role. They will be the gatekeeper. They might really have the key to resources that might be needed for peace processes. And I would say that the final point is that new vulnerabilities will arise, as it happens with any kind of technology, and that will open the door to a new task, which is critical infrastructure protection, which is something that we already know, but now can be taken into at a different level. So I don't want to waste any more time, but I just want to throw some of the possible trends for the future. And we see, since it's an ongoing process, whether they may work and head into the right direction, or it might be even more problematic for the PeaceTech process. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Andrea. And actually, that brings me perfectly to the final question that I want to ask our speakers in the first round, to Lena, which is precisely about this kind of the potential that we see with this technology in the peace field, whether it has the potential to address deep-rooted political or social conflicts, or it's kind of just a superficial band-aid that we kind of try to throw at any problem that we see in the hope that it will solve it somehow. So from your vast experience in this field, can you share a little bit about your experience of specifically where you see PeaceTech making a significant difference in either reducing conflict or fostering dialogue, and where maybe some cases where it has fallen short?
Thanks. Good morning, everybody. Happy to be here. I want to take us back to April 2019 at the Easter bombings in Sri Lanka. 270 people were killed, 500 injured, and it was like a stabbing of a knife within an already wounded and fractured society. So it set off incredible cycles of violence, revenge. And a few days later, there was a rumor that in a Muslim-majority village, some soldiers from the government had been attacked and killed. And this rumor spread quickly, and a minister from the government went on air and announced this. And it was, again, just a powder keg waiting to explode. And at that time, Search for Common Ground had started to pilot something with what we then called group admins, people who were had set up online groups about cooking and fashion and sports and celebrities and all that gossip news in Sri Lanka. And we'd begun to train them about how to detect, discern, understand fake news. And so within a matter of hours, they were able to determine that the news that had been shared was fake. They sent it out through the groups that they were part of, which actually later on we realized, because they were such large groups and pages, like Facebook pages, reached about 70% of the population. This was heard by the minister, who went back on air and debunked that claim. And so in this instance, we were able to see what we most cared about at that point in time was, are the online dynamics triggering offline violence? Are we really understanding how all of this, a connected world through all the meta products and everything is really making things better or worse? And so that kicked off for Search for Common Ground. Firstly, an understanding of what can we do to enable peace builders to better navigate the conflicts that are manifesting online and use the existing social media tools to build peace. And what did we mean by building peace? Number one, we talked about agency, right? It's the first of our aligned measures in our peace impact framework. How can we move people from apathy to agency? Because we'd understood that people, when we did research, particularly in conflict-affected countries, when they found themselves bombarded with fake news and toxic content, they often turned away. They often withdrew. And so our first challenge was, how do we equip people to be able to discern, to detect, and to keep themselves safe? And that included the codification of what we now call the digital community stewards, people who host online spaces, so that they could be equipped to not only know how to engage and get people excited about being a member of the group, but also deal with harmful content, including fake news. We also wanted people to say, how can we be able to address the polarization that was being aggravated by the social media platforms, right? What could peace builders do? Many of my colleagues at the time were like, well, we have a Facebook page. We talked about the training that we did last week. And I said, I don't think that's going to be enough, right? So then it was about using social media listening tools to be able to understand where were the dividing lines, where were the rumors that were perhaps at a narrative level going to be triggering more violence, and how could we both in online, offline, and particularly in media spaces begin to tackle those things. So we were trying to address polarization. And then thirdly, many important leaders in the peace building field that many of you are practitioners or researchers know, religious leaders, community leaders, youth, were not necessarily feeling confident and skilled to be able to raise those constructive voices, right? They kept, I can't tell you how many search peace builders said, can we just get like the popular influencer to talk about peace? I said, I don't think the popular peace builder is going to talk about peace. I think what we need to do is really equip people to understand how to safely amplify their voices, how to know how to target audiences, how to use even some of these video tools. And I remember, in Kyrgyzstan in Central Asia, we were able to really help an imam who could see some of the toxic, really divisive content online to be able to raise his voice and to be able to have more authentic connections and communications with his constituency. But then I want to just talk about a second piece of what's also happened, is that the more we expanded, 5, 10, 15, 20 programs about digital peace building and tackling fake news and digital literacy and digital security, we realized that we're running up a slippery hill. And that, fundamentally, this kind of polarization and hate speech and divisiveness and sensationalism is being accelerated and amplified by design, right? These are the way these different platforms are being designed. And it's why we then co-founded this Council on Tech and Social Cohesion, because we knew that the technologists who'd been at Google and Meta and Instagram, that they understood the design of these platforms, and that there was actually a different way to be able to make these platforms healthier and safer. And that has been the focus of the Council on Tech and Social Cohesion, to bring these two perspectives together, to identify in a very crowded space of trying to fix sort of every harm about social media, to say, what is it particularly that we know about social cohesion and polarization that's being triggered by tech design. And so in that way, we've been focusing on, a number of research around alternatives to engagement-based ranking recommender systems, looking at alternatives. Recently, one of our members produced the Better Feeds report, which built on other work looking at 20 examples of alternative ways to rank content. Yesterday, I was in a consultation with the DSA in Brussels, and platforms were there, and Pinterest, was able to say we've chosen to not only rank content based on engagement because we know it doesn't always serve people's well-being. And similarly, around the issues that we've seen as peace builders of when the content is so toxic, particularly for women and girls and non-binary people, that we are silencing and that we are closing down the space for those voices and people to participate effectively. So we've done a lot of work on pointing to ways that we can make it harder for that harm to be promulgated online in the first place. A couple of weeks ago, we put out a report called Prevention by Design, Tackling TFGB at the Root. And so these are the layers that we're looking at in terms of how do we work within the platforms that are challenging in their design, but still make sure that peace builders and the stakeholders we work with are equipped to do what is possible to do within those platforms. And number two, looking upstream at the causes of these. I'll stop there for now.
Thank you so much, Lena, and also sharing some of the work sort of that you're doing also with these tech companies. That's been a theme that came up yesterday and also this morning, that we sort of need to look at how do we really engage also with those actors that are creating the platforms that people are on to take some of these concerns into consideration. I want to come to a second round and ask first, Michele, you already spoke about digital inclusion being one of the issues that CMI is also focusing on. And so I want to ask you maybe this kind of standard question of the maybe a little bit skeptical non-PeaceTech expert that I am, which is, of course, how can we really design or utilize PeaceTech to include marginalized groups rather than exacerbating existing inequalities, right? And this came out also of some of the comments that we've already heard. And so what does digital inclusion really look like in conflict-affected areas where, for example, digital access is limited? So if you could take us away.
So thank you for your question. I think digital inclusion is, of course, one of the core things we do, and one of our priorities. So the way it works at CMI, we have different regional teams, but then there's one team that is dedicated to inclusion of women and youth, but also to the digital element. So this kind of inclusion, innovation side of what we do, they go together. They go together because the digital dimension is of course, a great chance to, as I said, to include more people, but also include, of course, different people, but also engaging them differently in a way. As I said, with different our stakeholders see a difference when we integrate these methodologies and these technologies in what we do, in terms, again, of equalizing some of the power dynamics and being able to prioritize different issues, different topics, and do this with the scale and or depth. So it's both like a wider representation or a more in-depth representation of people. But of course, this builds on the point that, of course, inclusion is good. So research shows that, of course, we give it for granted, but talking to people maybe outside of this room is not that recognized, and we heard about different approaches to peacemaking, then maybe they don't take into account inclusion because maybe it's not important. Why including women? Why including different minorities? And it might sound as a value statement. So we are the democracies, we know better, we should include. But actually, it's really, in the research at least, like a matter of sustainability of the peace agreement. So if you include more people in the peace process, it's shown that the peace process is more sustainable, lasts longer, and that's also the experience with CMI and also with the early work of Martti Ahtisaari, which one of the core values it was like always saying is that you should treat everyone equally. It might sound like a very naive or simple statement, but if you think about it, it's not. Of course, treating everyone equally, it means you have to talk like also to what you consider maybe enemies or people that they are not, they don't qualify as good, interlocutors. This is really a powerful statement. He was saying like peace is made among enemies, not friends. So I'm saying all of these things just to frame a little bit the answer. And then, yes, of course, we know that there's a big problem of digital divide, or not all the people in the world are connected to the internet, but still, kind of 2/3 of the people in the world are using social media, are connected. There are also like some initiatives now from the UN, and there's one called Giga that wants to connect every school to the internet. So there's a big push towards connectivity anyway, and people are using social media anyway. So we need to be, of course, careful of the digital divide, but also, and mindful of that, but also still have like a reality check and understand that, of course, there's more people you will not be able to reach that you can still reach and hear their voices. And of course, we always this idea of complementarity in mind. So it's not the tech, but it's tech coupled with other things, analog processes and all of that. And of course, there's an element of safety on the ground. You need to make sure that this information you're collecting are collected safely. They're not going into the wrong hands. But also there are some solutions to that. We always operate with anonymity and with encryption, and in that way, data are safe, are stored like with GDPR, safely, and we don't see many concerns in that regard. I can give, of course, some concrete example, maybe, and if there's like Q&A, but even like recently with this experience with youth consultations in Yemen with this Talk to the City tool, which is an AI tool for sense making, and we gave to the tool data from WhatsApp, and it was really good experience because the AI was able to translate from Yemeni dialect very accurately. We of course double checked with the local actors that this was accurate. And we were surprised, and also voice messages, which also overcomes the barrier of literacy. So we were able to get much data that then the AI was able to extract and organize, but also not in a black box system, but connecting the single statements of people with broader topic categorization and topics and subtopics, which was then used for topic prioritization and to continue the dialogue process and conversation. So maybe a couple of things. Another mantra in the PeaceTech space is that you need to meet people where they are. So you need to do very good conflict analysis first and digital conflict analysis to see what are the most used platforms, if it's WhatsApp, if it's like Telegram, or they're using other things. So you don't always want to go with very sophisticated things, but of course use also low tech and meet people where they are, often with off-the-shelf solutions. And yeah, I will just close off with the potentials of AI there, which I think they are great. I already mentioned this example, but of course you have different possibilities of engaging, not just like translating, but also making data more easy to understand and meaningful, and this helps a lot inclusivity if this is of course implemented properly. And I will not repeat myself, but of course this always happens in a network of trust, where you already establish yourself as a trust partner, and of course tech becomes just an enhancer of what you do. But we do see the transformative role of tech that allow us to do things we were not able to do before, and do our work better. But it's always, the ownership is always in the hands of the conflict parties, and they own the process. We're just there to support and facilitate. So yeah, I hope this answers the question.
Thank you so much. And I think it actually leads me nicely to the next question, which is precisely around, like you were saying, you know, you're using encryption and you're making sure that the data you're collecting is always anonymous, and that the ownership of the process should lie with the people who it's meant to be used by, or you know, that it's designed for. But I think that brings us also to the question that Lena alluded to a little bit, because of course the way these technologies are designed, they're rarely designed by peace-building organizations or peace-building actors in any way, right? We're using technologies that, in most of the cases, large corporations are providing in one way or another. So I want to ask Andrea, who I think thought about this already a little bit. It's like, how do we balance this like potential for innovation with the sensitivity required, especially in conflict-affected context, when we're thinking of state surveillance, when we're working with tech partners from the private sector? So how do we balance this innovation with some of these ethical concerns around privacy and consent, for example?
Actually, I have no answer to this question, because I guess we need different kind of competencies. We gotta be lawyers, we gotta be engineers. So there is no catch-all solution, definitely. But I will try from and start from the problem. What are the problems? Because the great promise of innovation that they allow us to have easily available, cheap, fast, and effective solutions. So this is why we all have, I guess we all love when we download a new app. We can do something different, we can do something new, and we can do something better. Okay. But I would say that there are at least 3 problems, maybe 4 problems that peace builders need to face. The first one is what we already mentioned, that we rely on technologies. And technologies, unless, I mean, they are just built, but it's quite unlikely as far as I know that they are built by the agents themselves, they are offered by companies. And companies are driven by a great ideal, which is profit, is not humanitarian concern. So this is not a problem per se. The problem is to align the incentives that the companies have with the humanitarian goal. And of course, there are so many ways to do that. But beyond the fact that companies need to be made ethical, I guess there is a problem that we already know with what we call public-private partnerships, because we have been seeing that in the past, from the liberal turn in the 80s, that companies are part of public policies. But I would say that when it comes to critical infrastructures, that is the same as, let's say, private companies running nuclear plants, as big tech giving up information data on conflict-torn countries, regions. The problem is that their own incentive is just to get money. So that means that the technology they offer might not be bulletproof. It might not be tested. And in case there is a breach of data, what is the incentive that a company might have in letting know, oh, I've been intruded, so my data may be stolen? If a company does that, well, there's going to be a loss. So again, this is a problem. How to make, so the first concern that I will say, how to make companies accountable for their own work, how to make them transparent if they have very different incentives coming from the market. So that was the first concern, the first problem that I will raise. The second problem that I will raise is that the end user must be empowered. And that's, the old problem with cooperation. We don't just want, to impose or spread or just let people have commodities, programs, apps that come from somewhere else. That is not really helpful. What is helpful is just making locals part of the building of the technical solutions. And this is something that we can do, for example, with open source softwares, for example, where local programmers may contribute to the development of these softwares, where users themselves can be part of the game. What I found striking from your presentation, you said that we gotta give agencies to the people. On one hand, technology empowers people. Take, for example, just making information available. People on the ground can share images and information, that data on what's going on. So the second concern that I will have is that we gotta make sure that technology is co-produced, there is some kind of agency, even in the production of the technical solution. And, well, related to that, we can just squeeze it in the problem of co-development, is that the end user must be technically savvy and empowered so that there is a spillover effect, that we can have developments on the ground from the adoption of new technologies. And the third, I'm going to rush to the conclusion, the third problem that I will raise is what you already mentioned, is about data and the protection of data. And there are cases that are quite alarming. You might have heard of the Rohingya community, the displaced people in Bangladesh, that was about 3 to 4 years ago, and agencies that were in charge of the delivering food, medicine, aid, use techniques just to iris scan, for example, to track these people. What happened? The data that was collected was sold, basically, to Myanmar. So that is a huge problem because those people were fleeing from Myanmar, and the same data that is used to protect people might be used just for coercion, to intimidation, and in a way just to repress minorities. So how do we do that? This is why I guess some legal competence is necessary, because contracts is where we can force these companies, these actors, to be, as I said, accountable. They should be also transparent, and they should be, in a way, induced just to spread their own knowledge with the people on the ground. Final concern, we are talking about digital diplomacy, my turf. Tech embassies are now open. I'm not sure if you heard about that. Denmark was the first country that opened a tech embassy. Embassies are open where the power is, so in the Silicon Valley. And there are now initiatives. I don't exactly remember the name, so I gotta read them. The first one was the Cyber and Tech Retreat, but that was later developed with the aid of Australia in the Global Network of Cyber and Tech Diplomacy Coordinators and Ambassadors. This is something that is really a work in process, but that's where diplomacy really kicks in just framing and forging agreements. So negotiation with big techs may be a step forward. I'm not sure this is going to be the solution, but I guess solution will be negotiated over time and some progress can be achieved in that sense.
Thank you so much, Andrea, and for outlining these problems that we should think about in, the transformation of the field and our communication in general in the digital way. So my final question for a speaker is maybe a little bit of a more positive question, a more positive spin on this topic. And Lena has kindly agreed to be the one to answer this question, which is what gives you hope right now about the future of digital tools and its potential in transforming conflict and building social cohesion?
Yeah, thanks. I think there was a little quiz online recently, and I think Michele and I scored both as what were we were techno-pragmatists. Was that what it was? We weren't techno-optimists. There's a cool little score of like, are you a techno-pessimist? Or we were both techno-pragmatists. And I think that, I believe that as peace builders, we need to do all that we can to harness and keep people safe in the existing social media landscape, recognizing that it is not static, that it will move towards decentralization, and through litigation and regulation, things are going to change. And there's other options out there like Mastodon and Blue Sky and many other things that people could turn on today if they wanted to and have more algorithmic plurality. So there's that space. But where I really find, exciting things is, just going a little bit more in depth with what Michele was saying. Deliberative tech, the opportunity to really have deliberation in synchronous and asynchronous moments. AI-enabled tools like Remesh and others, Common Good AI, Unanimous.ai's CrowdSmart tools. There's you can find many of these explained and highlighted in the Substack that we curate at the Council on Tech and Social Cohesion. So if you go to techandsocialcohesion.org, you can go to the Substack and you'll see every week examples of these ways that technologies can be harnessed to bring us better together, to open up that sense of belonging. What I love about some of the new technologies in deliberative tech is that we're realizing that AI has the capability to listen really well, to voice in many languages, as Michele said, sense make, but also infer and sense where there might be common ground, going even beyond bridging statements, right? And so you're actually finding that AI has capabilities to generate consensus statements that have wider acceptance than human-generated consensus statements. Might sound a little scary for the mediators in the room. And again, it depends on how we decide to use this. So there was some research on this with what's called the Habermas machine, which did this kind of experiment. And one thing we're hoping to do is test that in the context of Syria and see to what degree deliberative tech, bridging algorithms, plus these more consensus-driven AI can really get us further. Other examples are, there was a Tokyo mayoral candidate who used AI to create his own avatar. So he was able to live stream and have conversations with like 76,000 people in a week because he had created his avatar, knew what he wanted to explain about his program, but was also at the same time able to listen at scale. Right? So we've got a program that we call Listening at Scale, which is really about how do you open up that conversation in a way that AI is incredibly helpful. And then you can also be programming and fine-tuning AI to be holding a role that can be very constructive. My husband is a Congolese, very famous journalist in the Congo, and we fine-tuned an AI guest which is an analyst of the Great Lakes, and is able to give a much more balanced perspective on current events than we often find in our live guests in his TV shows, right? So there's ways that we can fine-tune for a role to be either helping us listen to voices that maybe we couldn't reach, or seeking a more balanced perspective that's sometimes hard for us humans. I know that sounds horrible, but it's true. We have bias, and there may be opportunities for us to move in a way that AI is helping us to be even better at facilitation and mediation because we're fine-tuning it to not have that bias. That sounds counterintuitive because a lot of the headlines that you receive are about the bias baked into the models themselves, right? So there's a distinction. We can perhaps talk about this offline, but there's a distinction between how you fine-tune it to do a particular role versus asking it to search the web or search what it has been taught on. So there's a distinction there. And the last thing I want to say that I'm really very excited about, I'll be publishing a Substack about this in the next couple of days, is coming back to foresight, right? So there's the use of multiple AI agents. Some people will call them digital twins, where you can create models of a society. And one organization called CulturePulse.ai has been creating twinned versions of societies in conflict to be able to see to what degree there's a ripeness for peace, there's an augmentation or growth in fear, there's a readiness for cooperation. And so the tool itself has really been built to help us as peace builders know, where might this go? What happens if we introduce this policy? What happens if this incident might happen? And because they've created very nuanced AI twins, I mean, hundreds of them, each with like 95 different psychological and emotional characteristics, we're able to sort of game that forward and be able to see what's possible. Those are the areas that I'm excited to pilot in coming weeks and months. I understand that none of this can be happening without, ethical concerns and safety and security concerns, but the technology for me holds too much potential for us to really, really transform the way we enable people to dialogue, to build empathy, understanding, and flex those collaborative muscles so that they can build a world without violence.
Thank you so much, Lena. And I want to thank all our speakers and give them one round of applause. Thank you. And before I'll invite the audience for questions, so please think about them now. I've actually asked also AI to help me with preparing this panel and come up with some quick fire rapid questions to ask our panelists, which I did not prepare you for. But I just picked one, which I thought was actually really insightful. So I'm going to go the opposite way. So start with Lena, then Andrea, then Michele, and just to have a one sentence answer to this question, which is, if you had 1 million euros to invest in a PeaceTech project tomorrow, what would you fund? Lena?
I would want to have like 5 more compelling examples of using deliberative tech to really prevent conflict and drive consensus building and collaboration across divides in 5 places across the world that are experiencing conflict. I want to make the case quickly and effectively that this can transform the way we think about bridging divides.
Thanks. Andrea?
It's not a lot of money at
1 million?
1 million.
Just 1 million.
Sorry.
It's not enough for what I want to do with that. But I will just try and invest in the kind of technologies that empower people. As we said, the grassroots, like Ushahidi, the technology that allows people to report and, of course, with all the correction that I might need, anonymity, etc., any kind of action that might be relevant. Maybe that, kind of unfair use of violence on the side of the police, or riots, or natural accidents. That will be, in my view, the very small step, but it's something that we already know. We have been seeing the way it works, and sometimes we can make it work. So that's where I will bet my just tiny fraction of my 1 million fortune.
Thanks, Andrea. Michele?
I would fund what we're already working on, which is an AI agent, which is able to work across different data, from data collection to sense making to what we do with the sense making. So an AI agent that can talk to the mediator and support him from conflict analysis to drafting and intervention and supporting him, in all his work.
Thank you. Lots of good ideas on the table. Now I want to open it up to the audience. So please, we have exactly 20 minutes, and I'll take some questions.
Okay.
Sorry,
Yes.
Stefano, please.
Thanks a lot, Evelyn, and to our esteemed panelists, especially for the last thought-provoking a quick question that could inspire our fundraisers. And before that, for ending with a positive note, or at least with a series of viable ways. We actually have time for a round of 4 questions. I would ask to take 4 questions, then we'll see if we have more time for more. And I would ask everybody to introduce themselves before asking. Thank you.
My name is Mahmoud Bastati. I work with an organization called Build Up. We work at the intersection between technology and peace building. My question is mainly for Lena, but also for others. With the new shift that we've seen in the Meta's algorithms in January, it's removing third-party fact-checking, more relaxed content moderation, and more personalized political content. Which we don't have a lot of visibility on what that means, as we always do with Meta. But to me, that can only mean more polarizing content. My question is there anything being done in Search for Common Ground initiatives and digital work to tackle that and to kind of work on the negative effects that might come with this new policy by Meta, and also if there's anything being done on the advocacy level with the social media company.
Thank you. My name is Lorenzo Conti. I work for the European Peacebuilding Liaison Office. Actually, my question relates a bit to what Mahmoud has just asked, and also touch upon something that Professor Locatelli has briefly mentioned. That is the fact that ultimately, so I mean, we've been discussing quite a lot on how this big tech companies, there are flaws in the design and there are risks connected to the way they use data. They need to be accountable, but ultimately the problem is that we are all subjected to maybe some individuals, a very small amount of individuals that, depending on their mood, they can implement a massive change in the algorithm. Of they just can choose to interrupt the provision of a service, saying that the Ukrainian army depends on Elon Musk basically keeping Starlink alive. You might have some projects engaging community through Telegram channels, and Pavel Durov is not less of a weirdo than Elon Musk. So I wonder, both on a kind of a from a academic level, but also on a practitioner level, if there's any like discussion around risk mitigation of having to deal with ultimately a very small amount of sorry to use the term, like unstable individuals that could really have massive impact on millions, billions of people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Andrea. I'm the youth delegate of Italy to the United Nations. First of all, thank you very much to all the panelists for the very insightful topics and ideas shared and initiatives shared. I truly believe that the digital aspect of peace building is the new forefront for peace building and for the whole future of stability at the international and national level. And so for this, I also thank the Agency for Peacebuilding, of course, for organizing this and tailoring this forum on this aspect. My question is, so throughout my mandate, as I said, I've worked a lot about on the issues that generate and affect peacemaking. And the digital world also, of course, as well also the relation with the climate aspect. And when we speak about foresight, it's all kind of a really long-term vision, right? Because it's the digital world is currently developing and will develop a lot and really quickly. And same thing goes for the impact of the climate variant will have on this. And actually, the CMI being president, being Finnish, also spot to my mind that, I mean, Finland, of course, is always been a best practice, not only regionally but internationally in peacemaking. And they are currently the only country in Europe that has implemented a very important agenda, that is the Youth Peace and Security Agenda, that spotlights the importance of young people, not only in contributing to the impact on conflicts, but even in prevention of conflicts, of course. So my question is, my consideration also is related to the closing statement of Professor McGinty, since I feel that it truly spotlighted an important aspect of it, that the humanity of where peace comes from. So it all starts from our houses, and it all starts, in my opinion, also from the classroom. So educating on a culture of peace is fundamental for conflict prevention, since we all talk about a long-term vision. And since I want to spot the light also on this aspect, so maybe on a even more long-term, so on how education can shape peacemaking and peace building, I wanted to ask if you feel, and that's of course related to all panelists, if you feel that the digital world can in a way play a positive role in this process, or it can disrupt even more the there's a big issue with digital literacy, for example, but in general the process of educating to a culture of peace. Thank you very much.
Have time for one last question.
Oh, great, thank you. Hi, I'm Donata. I work on peace finance, and I'm here as an advisor to the Agency for Peacebuilding. Great question. Do you work with governments and regional organizations to bring these tech solutions to them so that they can use them in their decision making? Just a little example, when the European Union meets and in a few days decides to make available 800 billions, make available meaning guys mobilized 800 millions for defense, then I'm thinking, oh, wouldn't it be great if they met and in 3 days they had all this technology around them and figure out the options to actually deploy peace solutions instead of military solutions to deal with the crisis. So the question was, do you guys work with them? And if not, how can we do it?
Thank you for those questions. I know there are other questions in the room. I don't know if Stefano will allow me. No, he won't. Taking that, glad I can blame you for this. So yeah, we'll do one round of answers. Please take any question that you would like to respond to. We'll go in the order of the speakers. So starting with Michele.
Yeah, I think the first two questions were more addressed to you, but maybe starting from the last point. We work on project basis, so it depends. Normally, it's funded by public institutions, also some private funding, but it's more linked to the priorities and missions of the donors, which are the Finnish Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the European Union. So what we do, especially with digital peacemaking, is all oriented to the stakeholders on the ground that are, leading a peace process, etc. So we always have the stakeholders as a final endpoint for what we do. But of course, we do have relationship with the ministry and with governments, but it's more in the area of capacity building. So we train them, or they ask us for training on all these different matters. Also the UN we trained, and so it's not systematic, so to speak. But it's very, very important, and also that not only with government, but also with the what kind of a relationship we can also establish with the private sector in Finland. There's a thriving tech ecosystem, and we're also trying to leverage that towards our goal. And for the education, of course, education it's key. I believe it's really a cultural. Forgive me for the word, but cultural war about really being more clear what is peace. It has to do with addressing root causes of conflict. It's something that can augment security, whereas peace is always misunderstood as something that has to do with appeasement or something a bit hippie, something a bit. So there's really a big cultural work to do, and technology can help with that. As I said, there are programs that want to connect schools to the internet, but the problem is always what do you do with that? So even with the internet, we were very enthusiastic. Democracy will be everywhere, everybody will be educated, and it became this place for fake news and for interference, you name it. The same is with AI, great potentials, but it's not enough to connect people to the internet to allow them to use AI. But of course, it needs to be designed in a way that, by design, it's not conducive to these negative features that we all know about.
Thanks, Andrea.
I'll try to tackle all questions. I do not work with governments in development or mediation, so I'm just an academic, fortunately. I don't take decisions, just read, and sometimes I talk. I'll try to answer the issue of, the individuals, which is very interesting. There are, if you read Varoufakis' book that was published last year, he used the term techno-feudalism, that in a way resembles the idea of the new social pact, where these kind of people will be, the pillar of future city-state systems. But I don't subscribe entirely to that view. But I would say that, yes, it happens sometimes that some people get super empowered. The idea of super empowered people, if I remember properly, was used for Bin Laden in 2001. He's a super empowered guy, so we got to fight. So this is not new. But the point is that how do we, this is a problem of politics, how do we tame super empower people? How do we make sure that their behavior is not erratic and is not detrimental to our interest? And I would say that there might be some breaks. And the first one is paradoxical, is politics. Politics is made to regulate, and it's not working that well right now. The other answer may be the markets, paradoxical. And we have seen something going on like that, if you take Tesla as an example. And markets, and the way markets are now fragmented, the globalization effect may just give us a clue of how to tame these people. But I'm not sure that this is going to work, because that's a conflict. Those people want to have the most that they can get. I don't blame them for that. But we got to oppose that. So in that sense, I got Mrs. Feeling, but I think they will still play a role unless they get incentive just to back down, to open up to new competitors so that we can have other suppliers. And if you want, we can talk about the defense market that I know a little, and this is something that is happening. Final word about culture and education. I will say that this is why I'm very much pessimistic, because I've seen digital diplomacy, and diplomats do their own job. They are bureaucrats. They obey. They gotta follow the orders. And now what we've seen that the diplomatic work in conflict is really just sending a message, a narrative. And the narrative is not that we gotta get to peace, but we gotta win. And we gotta project an image of ourselves that we are the good guys and the enemy is the bad guy. And so this is the polarizing effect. This is one of my main concerns, because they know that winning war is not just a matter of military victory. It's also a matter of getting consensus online. And if you want to get consensus, we don't want to have subtleties. They have their own reason, but we don't care. We are the good guys. We are heroes or victims. And they do the worst. So this is why I'm saying that there is a lot of work for us, and these kind of technologies, they need to be addressed, and they need to be tackled very cautiously, and we got to make a lot of work to make them head in the right direction.
Thanks. And finally, Lena.
So I just want to acknowledge that it's really hard today to say that we're building a culture of peace in the absence of shared truths. And it's not going to get better, right? And, Roger, you were talking about facts versus relationships. And I don't think it's the death of facts completely, but the way in which we're experiencing this information ecosystem, it's crazy, right? So we do also need to think as peace builders, how do we help people to grow trust so that they can trust different perspectives, feel comfortable with difference and diversity and conflict. And either we try to nudge those commercial platforms to give more algorithmic plurality, to accept middleware, which would enable us to have third-party plugins so that you could choose all different kinds of feeds, right? There's an advocacy agenda around trying to shape the big tech. And what I think we should be most concerned about is how do we enable people to still be comfortable, whether it's through their AI chatbot or through their feed, with diverse perspectives. Because the further we get away from that, it's going to be really difficult, the work that we need to do. Mahmoud, I have so much admiration for Build Up as an organization. Check them out if you don't know them. I don't think that we're going to fact check or digital literacy our way through this, So, and there was, not everybody agreed that fact checking was doing such a great job, So I believe that we should be advocating towards the regulation of those big platforms so that they give us less harmful products. You can take a consumer protection on this, and there's a whole number of things that can be asked for. And if they don't, people can walk away, and peace builders can be part of helping people to have good experiences on other social media platforms. There have been hundreds of pro-social media platforms created, and they just haven't captured your attention. They haven't been as sexy. This week, I was brought to know a new one in Tanzania and Uganda. Nigerians, if Meta decides to pull out, not sure if you saw that headline, they were slapped with some fines and said, we might pull out of Nigeria. If they do, are Nigerians not capable to build a social media network? Of course they are, right? So again, some of this is about regulation, litigation, and reputation. And I do believe that in the coming months and years, there's going to be a lot of movement in this space. And Donata, your question, I don't think that's being done. I don't think there's a question of looking at the defense portfolio and really asking the very good questions that you've asked. At least I have not seen that. The only efforts that we're trying to do, whether it's with the tech and social cohesion or others, is if regulators from across the world asked the same thing of Meta and X, they would listen. And right now, they're not asking for the same thing. You've got the DSA, you've got the OSA in the UK, you've got some state legislation, and the tech companies are benefiting from that lack of coherence. Just going to your question, Lorenzo, it's a challenging moment, but the DSA, it's really important that they hold the line on where they're at, because they're at the forefront of really navigating that space. So the despair about the tech monopolies doesn't make me despair about the potential of PeaceTech and AI. And that's how I kind of separate them. One is a struggle against the most powerful market force that's ever existed in human history. The other is about how do we work together and build tech tools safely that can drive the collaboration we know we need.
Thank you, and thanks again to all our speakers.